At 05:47 hours on October 3, 1944, Private First Class Samuel Webb lay behind his Springfield scope in an abandoned French farmhouse, watching a German major through morning mist 650 yards across the valley near Fort Driant. The major stood next to a radio truck, field glasses raised, pointing toward American positions while coordinating mortar crews. Webb's breathing was steady. His finger rested outside the trigger guard. The smell of wet earth and diesel exhaust drifted through the broken window where he'd positioned himself. Corporal Danny Price, his spotter, lay next to him with binoculars. Price whispered, "That's 650. Winds gusting 8 to 10 miles per hour. You're wasting ammo on an impossible shot." Webb said nothing. His eyes stayed fixed to the scope. He watched the treetops between his position and the German major. The leaves moved right to left. He calculated windage. The wind was quartering, not direct. He adjusted his mental calculation. Elevation for 650 yards meant the bullet would drop approximately 4 feet from point of aim. He'd compensated for that 100 times. His scope was already dialed. The major lowered his field glasses, turned to speak to a radio operator, exposed his full profile. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Webb's breathing slowed. He exhaled halfway, held. His heartbeat was 62 beats per minute. He'd timed it 1,000 times in West Virginia forests. He squeezed the trigger between heartbeats. The Springfield kicked. The 173-grain M2 ball round left the barrel at 2,640 feet per second. Flight time was approximately 0.9 seconds. Webb watched through the scope. The major's head snapped back. He dropped instantly. The radio operator dove for cover. The mortar crews froze. For 15 seconds, nobody moved. Then confusion spread through the German position like water through cracked ice. The mortars that had been firing coordinated patterns at American positions went silent. When they resumed 30 seconds later, the fire was sporadic, random, no observed pattern, no coordination. The shells landed 200 yards from where they should have landed if the major had been alive to direct them. Price exhaled hard. Jesus, Backwoods lucky. Again. Webb was already scanning for the next target. His voice was quiet, almost flat. Ain't luck. The 5th Infantry Division had been in France for 8 weeks. In that time, they'd taken 38% casualties, the highest rate in the sector. The mathematics of it were brutal and simple. 300 men lost from an 800-man battalion. Most of those losses came from German counterattacks that seemed to anticipate every American advance, every defensive position, every attempt at maneuver. The problem wasn't German firepower. American artillery superiority was 3-1. The Americans had more tanks, more air support, more of everything that doctrine said won battles. But German counterattacks kept succeeding anyway. They came fast. They came coordinated. They exploited gaps in American lines before those gaps could be reinforced. The pattern centered on German junior officers. The average German hauptmann, a captain equivalent rank, had 15 years of military training and 4 years of combat experience. Poland in 1939. France in 1940. Russia from 1941 to 1943. Italy in 1943. These men knew terrain, knew how to read ground, coordinate supporting fire, maneuver units through broken country. They could see an American defensive position and identify its weaknesses in 30 seconds. The average American lieutenant had 6 months of training and 6 weeks of combat experience. Good men, brave men, but inexperienced. The tactical gap between German and American junior leadership was the difference between veteran professional soldiers and enthusiastic amateurs learning on the job. American doctrine said, shoot enemy soldiers, suppress infantry, destroy machine gun positions. Doctrine assumed officers were protected, located in rear area command posts, insulated from direct fire. And in open terrain, that assumption held. Officers stayed back. They coordinated from safety. But the French hedgerow country changed everything. The bocage terrain forced German officers forward. Hedgerows were 8-foot-tall earthen walls covered in vegetation, creating a maze of small fields and narrow lanes. Radio signals didn't penetrate well. Visual control was impossible from rear positions. German officers had to move forward to see their units, to coordinate fire, to direct movement across terrain where every field was a separate battle. Nobody in the American Army was systematically exploiting this vulnerability. When German officers exposed themselves, American riflemen occasionally shot them. But it was opportunistic, accidental. Not deliberate doctrine. The statistical reality was clear. When a German officer died, attacks faltered for 15 to 20 minutes. Unit cohesion dropped. Coordination failed. Supporting fire arrived late or landed off target. Soldiers who'd been advancing aggressively became hesitant. They waited for orders that never came because the man giving orders was dead. But American command didn't target officers systematically. The reasoning was consistent across battalions and divisions. Officers were too difficult to identify at combat ranges, too protected, too risky to spend ammunition on low-percentage shots. Better to shoot soldiers you could see and hit reliably than waste bullets chasing hard targets. Samuel Webb was 22 years old. He came from Mingo County, West Virginia. His father, Jeremiah Webb, was a turkey hunter and coal miner. In Appalachian shooting culture, missing meant hunger. That wasn't metaphor. That was economic reality. Webb learned to shoot at age 7. His first rifle was a Winchester single-shot .22 caliber. His father's teaching philosophy was direct. A shot's either good or wasted. Ain't no in-between. If you missed, you didn't eat. If you wounded and lost the animal, you didn't eat and you wasted a bullet. Bullets cost money. Money came from coal mining, which destroyed men's lungs by age 50. Every wasted bullet was hours of a man's life spent underground in darkness. The training regimen was simple and brutal. Squirrels at 70 yards with iron sights, no scopes, no second chances. Squirrels were small targets, maybe 4 inches from nose to tail. A squirrel's kill zone, the head and upper chest, was 2 inches. At 70 yards with iron sights, hitting a 2-inch target required wind reading, breathing control, and absolute patience. Webb learned to read wind by watching treetops, leaves, grass movement. Different vegetation moved at different wind speeds. Treetops showed upper-level winds. Grass showed ground-level currents. A good shooter read both and calculated the average. Webb's father taught him to time his breathing to his heartbeat. Exhale halfway, hold, squeeze the trigger between beats. The heart's pulse moved the rifle. Shooting between beats eliminated the movement. Patience was the hardest lesson. Wait for the shot, don't force it. A squirrel would eventually move to a clear position, present a clean target, hold still for 2 seconds. Rushing meant missing. Missing meant hunger. Webb learned to wait. Turkey hunting raised the difficulty. 100-yard shots on 6-inch targets. A turkey's head and neck were the only lethal zones. Hit the body with a .22 and you wounded the bird. It would run. You'd never find it. You'd wasted the shot and killed the animal slowly. Webb's father had one rule: 1 shot, 1 bird, or you spooked the whole flock and ruined the hunt for everyone. The economic reality shaped everything. Ammunition cost money. Missed shots cost meals. Webb's discipline wasn't formed by sports shooting or recreational marksmanship. It was formed by necessity, by the knowledge that carelessness had direct, immediate consequences. Webb enlisted in December of 1942, 2 weeks after finishing high school. He scored expert marksman at basic training. The range instructors noticed immediately: natural wind compensation, exceptional patience. Wouldn't take a shot unless conditions were perfect. They assigned him to sniper school at Fort Benning. The instructors noted his abilities, but also noted problems. Unorthodox technique. Doesn't follow manual procedures. Webb shot by feel, not by textbook calculations. He couldn't explain how he knew where the wind would push the bullet. He just knew. The instructors didn't like that. Sniping was supposed to be scientific, mathematical, repeatable. Webb's methods worked, but they weren't teachable. He arrived in France in August of 1944. For the first 2 weeks, he followed doctrine, shot enemy infantry, targeted machine gunners, riflemen, soldiers in the open. His results were adequate. Kill count was average for a sniper. But there was no tactical impact. He was removing individual soldiers from a battle that involved thousands. During his 3rd week in France, he started noticing the officer pattern. August 21st, 1944. Webb's first officer kill. A German lieutenant stood 520 yards away, coordinating machine gun positions. The lieutenant was directing 2 MG-42 crews, pointing at American positions, assigning fields of fire. Webb watched him for 90 seconds, calculated the shot, took the shot without asking permission from anyone. The lieutenant dropped. The machine gun fire became immediately uncoordinated. The 2 crews fired independently, overlapping their sectors, leaving gaps. An American platoon advanced through one of those gaps with 0 casualties. Doctrine predicted 8 to 10 casualties for that advance. Webb noticed. He said nothing to anyone, but he noticed. August 24th. Webb killed a hauptmann at 580 yards. The hauptmann was coordinating a counterattack, directing 3 infantry squads and a mortar team. When the hauptmann died, the counterattack delayed 14 minutes. By the time a replacement officer arrived and re-established coordination, American artillery had ranged in on the German assembly area. The counterattack arrived piecemeal, unsupported, and American artillery destroyed German armor before infantry could advance to support it. Corporal Price started questioning Webb's target selection. "Why do you keep targeting officers? They're harder shots, lower success rate." Webb's answer was simple. Kill a sergeant, you get 1 rifle out of action. Kill a lieutenant, you get 30 rifles confused. September brought systematic approach. Webb started mapping German command posts based on radio antenna placement, foot traffic patterns, vehicle movement. He learned to identify officer ranks by uniform details at 600 yards and beyond. German majors wore binoculars on straps, carried map cases, wore field caps instead of helmets. Hauptmanns positioned themselves 30 to 50 yards behind the main line, where they could see their units and coordinate fire without exposing themselves to direct small arms fire. Oberleutnants, the platoon leaders, moved with assault units, directing movement with hand signals and voice commands. Webb developed a target priority system. Priority 1, battalion commanders, majors and oberleutnants. These men coordinated multiple companies, planned maneuvers, allocated supporting fire. Kill 1 and an entire battalion's effectiveness dropped for an hour or more. Priority 2, company commanders, hauptmanns. These men controlled the immediate tactical fight. Priority 3, platoon leaders, oberleutnants. These men led from the front and were easiest to identify and engage. September 28th, Webb had 19 confirmed officer kills, all at ranges exceeding 500 yards. His battalion commander, Major Thomas Gaines, noticed a pattern. German counterattacks in Webb's sector were arriving late, uncoordinated, failing to achieve objectives. Gaines requested intelligence analysis. The intelligence conclusion was careful and non-committal. Possible disruption to German command structure. Recommend further observation. But there was no doctrinal change, no systematic implementation. Other snipers in the division continued targeting enlisted men. The standard reasoning held. Officers were too hard to identify, too protected, too risky. Price kept calling Webb's success Backwoods lucky. Other snipers called Webb reckless, said he'd get himself killed taking low-percentage shots on hard targets. Webb didn't argue, just kept shooting officers. Then intelligence reported something significant. October 3rd through 4th, the German 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division was planning a major counterattack. Target, Fort Driant Sector, 5th Infantry Division positions. Expected force: 3 battalions, 2,400 men, armor support. American orders were clear. Hold position, accept high casualties, wait for reinforcements. Webb saw opportunity. He requested permission to operate independently forward of American lines. Get close to German assembly areas. Target officers during their preparation phase. Disrupt their coordination before the attack even started. Permission denied. Too dangerous. Too isolated. Couldn't be supported if German forces discovered him. Webb would be 800 yards forward of friendly lines with no backup, no escape route, no support. Webb went anyway. On the evening of October 2nd, he took his Springfield, took Price, and moved to a forward position. They found an abandoned farmhouse 800 yards from the German assembly area. The building's second floor was partially collapsed, but it offered clear sight lines to 3 likely German command posts. Webb settled into position, loaded 5 rounds into his Springfield's magazine, checked his remaining ammunition. 25 rounds total. He told Price, 48 hours. We break their command structure or we die trying. Price looked at him like he was insane. Maybe he was. But Webb had watched too many American soldiers die in German counterattacks that succeeded because German officers coordinated better than American officers could respond. Doctrine said, accept casualties. Webb said, create chaos in the enemy command instead. The sun set. The temperature dropped to 42 degrees. Webb and Price settled in for a long, cold night. By dawn, German officers would be preparing their assault. Webb would be waiting. At 0530 hours, Webb and Price had been in position for 6 hours. The temperature held at 42 degrees. Light fog hung in the valley. Wind came from the northwest at 5 to about 8 miles per hour, gusting occasionally to 10. The cramped second-floor position in the abandoned farmhouse offered no comfort. Webb's legs had gone numb an hour earlier. Price shifted every few minutes, trying to maintain circulation. Cold seeped through their uniforms. Exhaustion pulled at both men. Neither had slept. Price whispered, "This is insane. We're 800 yards forward of our lines. If the Germans find us, we're dead. No support, no backup. Nobody even knows we're here." Webb said nothing. His eye stayed fixed to the scope, watching German positions across the valley. 3 radio antennas marked 3 command posts. The center post showed the most activity. Foot traffic moved in organized patterns. Soldiers arrived, received orders, departed. That was the primary command post. The left antenna showed moderate activity, company-level command. The right antenna was quiet, probably logistics or communications relay. At 0547 hours, a German major emerged from the center command post. Webb recognized him immediately. Field glasses on a strap, map case under his arm, field cap instead of helmet. The major walked to a radio truck, raised his field glasses, and pointed toward American positions while speaking to a mortar crew. He was coordinating indirect fire, setting target priorities, establishing firing patterns. Webb calculated 650 yards, wind right to left, 8 miles per hour, quartering wind, not direct. He adjusted his scope. 4 clicks right for windage, 2 clicks up for elevation. His breathing slowed. He exhaled halfway, held, felt his heartbeat. 62 beats per minute. He squeezed the trigger between beats. The Springfield kicked against his shoulder. The 173-grain M2 ball round left the barrel at 2,640 feet per second. Flight time was approximately 0.9 seconds. Through the scope, Webb watched the Major's head snap back. The Major collapsed. The radio operator dove behind the truck. The mortar crew froze. For 15 seconds, the German position was silent. Then confusion spread. Soldiers ran toward the fallen Major. Others shouted questions. The mortar crews stopped receiving coordinated fire missions. When they resumed firing 30 seconds later, the shells landed randomly. No pattern, no observed adjustments. The coordination that had existed when the Major was alive disappeared the moment he died. Price exhaled hard. Jesus, you actually got him. Webb was already scanning through his scope, searching for the next target. His finger moved outside the trigger guard. 1 round expended, 19 remaining, 11 hours until sunset. At 06:15 hours, a hauptmann emerged from the second command post on the left. Distance, 720 yards. The hauptmann carried a map case and field glasses. He walked with purpose toward a group of soldiers gathered near 3 half-track vehicles. Company commander. Webb watched him for 40 seconds, confirming rank and function. The hauptmann spread a map on the hood of 1 half-track, began pointing at positions, assigning sectors. Webb adjusted for the increased range. Wind had shifted slightly, now more direct from the northwest. He compensated. Exhaled, held, squeezed. The shot broke clean. The hauptmann dropped face first onto the map. 3 soldiers scattered. 1 ran toward the command post, shouting. Another dropped to cover behind the half-track. The third stood frozen, staring at the body. For 2 minutes, no officer emerged to replace the hauptmann. The company's coordination structure had vanished. Soldiers milled near the half-tracks, waiting for orders that didn't come. Webb reloaded, chambering a fresh round. At 07:02 hours, the German attack was scheduled to begin, according to American intelligence estimates. It didn't materialize. American forward observers reported German units milling in assembly areas with no coordinated movement. Radios were active, but nobody seemed to be directing operations. The attack that should have launched precisely at 0700 hours was simply not happening. At 07:45 hours, Webb's third target appeared. An oberleutnant was attempting to organize an infantry platoon in the right sector. Distance, 580 yards, an easier shot than the previous 2. The oberleutnant stood in the open, directing soldiers with hand signals. He was young, probably 24 or 25. He moved with confidence, pointing soldiers toward positions, trying to establish some order in the chaos. Webb centered the crosshairs during the oberleutnant's moment of maximum exposure. The officer had both arms extended, signaling 2 different squads simultaneously. Webb fired. The oberleutnant fell. The platoon immediately scattered. Soldiers who'd been moving toward their assigned positions stopped, looked around, lost formation. The entire unit's cohesion vanished in the 3 seconds it took the oberleutnant to die. Price was now fully invested in what was happening. They don't know what's happening. They think it's artillery. They think we're shelling them from 8 miles away. Webb's voice remained flat. Good. Let them think that. At 08:23 hours, a German battalion commander attempted to restore order. An oberleutnant emerged from the primary command post, the one with the highest radio antenna. This was Webb's priority target. Battalion-level officer, senior enough to coordinate 3 companies, allocate supporting fire, restore the command structure that Webb had been systematically destroying. Distance, 790 yards. Extreme range for a Springfield. Webb had made shots at this distance before, but not many. Wind was gusting, conditions uncertain. He watched through the scope. The oberleutnant walked toward a group of junior officers, map case in hand. He was taking control, giving orders, re-establishing the chain of command. Webb waited. Wind gusted hard right to left. He held fire. The oberleutnant kept walking. 30 seconds passed. 40. The wind settled. Brief lull between gusts. Webb adjusted scope. Breathed. Squeezed. The shot broke during the 2-second window when wind conditions were optimal. The oberleutnant dropped. This kill changed everything. The German battalion lost its commander. All coordinated attack planning halted. American listening posts monitoring German radio frequencies intercepted confused traffic. Units requesting orders, asking for confirmation, requesting clarification on objectives. Nobody responded with authority. The command structure had collapsed. At 0900 hours, German forces realized they were under sniper fire. Radio intercepts confirmed it. Amerikanischer Scharfschütze. American sniper. The German response was immediate and predictable. Officers stopped moving in open areas. Command posts relocated behind better cover. The radio antennas that Webb had been using to identify command locations disappeared. Germans were lowering them or moving them to mislead observers. Webb's hunting ground shrank. For the next 3 hours, no targets appeared. Officers stayed hidden. When they needed to move, they moved quickly, using cover, minimizing exposure. Price was getting nervous. They figured it out. They know there's a sniper forward of American lines. They'll send patrols to find us. We should pull back while we can. Webb kept watching through the scope. They haven't attacked. That's the point. Every minute they spend hiding from one sniper is a minute they're not attacking American positions. At 11:47 hours, the Germans had no choice but to move. The attack had been scheduled for 0700 hours. It was now delayed 5 hours. Senior German commanders would be demanding action. Soldiers couldn't stay in assembly areas indefinitely. A new hauptmann emerged, attempting to coordinate the delayed assault. Distance, 680 yards. Brief exposure, maybe 5 seconds. The hauptmann moved quickly between 2 buildings, paused to give orders to a squad leader, then continued moving. Webb took the shot during the pause. 5th kill. The hauptmann fell in the narrow gap between buildings. German soldiers nearby scattered. The coordination effort collapsed again. At 12:20 hours, another oberleutnant tried to move a platoon forward. Distance 600 Meter, 615 yards. The oberleutnant was cautious, moving from cover to cover, but he had to expose himself to direct his soldiers. Webb waited for the exposure, fired when the oberleutnant paused to signal. 6th kill. The German platoon stopped advancing immediately. The German attack was completely stalled. Intelligence reports confirmed it. German units remained in assembly areas with no forward movement. The scheduled 0700-hour attack, now delayed over 5 hours, showed no signs of launching. American Battalion Commander Major Gaines realized something unusual was happening. German radio traffic was chaotic. No attack had materialized. Forward observers reported no German movement. Gaines sent a forward observer to investigate. The observer, a lieutenant named Marsh, reached Webb's position at 1340 hours. He was shocked to find Webb and Price 800 yards forward of American lines, inside what should have been German-controlled territory. Marsh said, "Command wants to know what the hell you're doing out here. You're supposed to be with your unit." Webb didn't look away from his scope. "Killing officers. Tell Gaines 6 down. German attacks dead." Marsh stared at him. 6? You've killed 6 German officers? 6 confirmed. Tell Gaines the 17th SS has lost its coordination. They won't attack today. Marsh returned to American lines with the message. Within 30 minutes, Gaines received confirmation through intelligence channels. German radio traffic indicated command structure problems, multiple requests for replacement officers, repeated delays in attack timing. At 15:35 hours, German commanders were forced to show themselves. A replacement battalion commander arrived from rear areas. A major, attempting to reorganize forces for an evening attack. Distance, 740 yards. The major stood near a Kubelwagen, giving orders to a group of officers. Webb fired. 7th kill. The major collapsed. The surrounding officers scattered. At 1612 hours, a hauptmann was coordinating artillery support, attempting to establish preparatory fire before the planned evening assault. Distance, 695 yards. The hauptmann was using a radio, standing next to the antenna that Webb had noted earlier. 8th kill. German artillery fire eventually arrived, but 45 minutes late and landing 200 yards off target. Without the hauptmann's coordination, the artillery crews were firing based on old information and poor communication. At 17:04 hours, an oberleutnant was rallying infantry soldiers, trying to organize them for the delayed assault. Distance, 625 yards. The oberleutnant stood on the back of a half-track, visible to his entire platoon, shouting orders. Webb fired. 9th kill. The soldiers scattered. The rally attempt failed. By 1800 hours, the German 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division had lost 9 officers in 12 hours. 3 battalions were completely paralyzed. No coordinated attack had been launched. American casualties were 0. Intelligence estimates had predicted 150 to 200 casualties from the German assault. Instead, Webb had broken the German command structures so thoroughly that the assault never happened. Webb's ammunition count, 9 rounds expended, 11 remaining. He reloaded the Springfield, chambered a fresh round. Price watched him, shaking his head. "This is the craziest thing I've ever seen work. 1 sniper, 9 German officers, an entire division paralyzed." Webb settled back into position, eyes on the scope. "Day's not over. They'll try again at dawn. Need to be ready." The sun was setting, temperature dropping. Another cold night in the farmhouse. But the German attack had failed before it started, and Webb had 36 hours left to ensure it stayed failed. At 20:30 hours, darkness fell across the valley. Webb and Price remained in the farmhouse, exhausted beyond anything they'd experienced in France. Neither man had slept in 24 hours. The German positions across the valley had gone quiet. No movement, no lights. The silence was almost worse than the activity. American lines sat 800 yards behind them. No support was possible. If Germans sent patrols to find them, Webb and Price would die alone in this farmhouse. Price said, "We should pull back. You've done enough. 9 German officers dead. Their attack failed. Command knows where we are now. Let them send another team." Webb kept his eye to the scope, scanning the darkness. "They'll attack at dawn. Need to be here when they do." The night was cold, Temperature dropped to 40 degrees. The sky cleared, stars visible through the broken roof. Both men established a watch rotation, 2-hour shifts. One man watched through the scope with the infrared filter removed, trying to catch movement in starlight. The other man slept if he could. Webb took the first shift from 2200 to 2400 hours. He watched German positions, saw flashlights occasionally, brief flickers of movement. The Germans were reorganizing under cover of darkness. New officers were arriving from rear areas, replacing the 9 dead men. Webb counted activity at 3 locations, 3 new command posts establishing themselves. He knew what that meant. Dawn would bring a fresh attempt. New officers, new coordination, new attack. At midnight, Price took over the watch. Webb tried to sleep. His body demanded it. But his mind wouldn't stop. He kept thinking about his father's teaching from 20 years ago in West Virginia forests. Patient hunter eats, rushed hunter starves. Webb had been patient, had waited for shots, had taken only the targets that mattered. 9 officers in 12 hours. But 3 more remained if he wanted to reach 12 total. 12 officers in 48 hours. The number felt important somehow, significant. At 0200 hours, German activity increased. American listening posts monitoring radio frequencies picked up increased traffic. Germans were planning a dawn assault for 0600 hours. 3 battalions, coordinated attack, armor support. Intelligence passed the information to forward units. This time, the Germans were expecting sniper fire. This time, they'd be protecting their officers. Smoke grenades, better cover, shorter exposure times. Webb woke without Price calling him. He checked his rifle. Springfield, M1903A4, 30 caliber 06 ammunition. The Weaver 330C scope with 2.5 times magnification. The weapon he'd carried since arriving in France in August. He knew its tendencies intimately. Shoots slightly left at 700 yards and beyond, consistent and reliable at 600. The trigger broke at 3.2 pounds. The stock had a small crack near the action that didn't affect function, but made a faint creak when shouldered. He reloaded the 5-round magazine, checked his spare ammunition. 20 rounds remaining, enough for 25 total shots if he conserved carefully. He needed 3 more officer kills to reach 12. 3 kills that would prove whether one sniper could truly break an entire division's combat effectiveness. At 0530 hours, pre-dawn darkness still covered the valley. Webb was in position, watching German lines through the scope. He could see movement now, muzzle flashes from vehicle engines starting. Exhaust vapor visible in cold morning air. The Germans were preparing armor support. Half-tracks, panzers, self-propelled guns. This assault would be heavier than yesterday's attempt. At 0548 hours, first light broke. German officers began emerging, but cautiously this time. They stayed in cover, minimized exposure, moved quickly between buildings. They'd learned from yesterday's losses. Webb identified a target, a hauptmann briefly visible between 2 buildings. Distance, 710 yards. Exposure window, 3 seconds. The hauptmann paused to give orders to a subordinate. Webb fired during that pause. 10th kill confirmed. The hauptmann dropped. The German response was immediate. Smoke grenades deployed across the command area. Gray smoke billowed up, obscuring Webb's view. Within 30 seconds, visibility dropped to near 0 in the German positions. Price said, "They're adapting. Smoke's going to blind us. We won't see targets." Webb kept watching through the scope. Smoke tells me where their commanders are. They're protecting something. That something is officers. At 0615 hours, the German assault began. Infantry advanced with armor support across the valley toward American positions. But the coordination was still imperfect. Webb could see it through gaps in the smoke. Tanks were advancing ahead of infantry. No communication between the two elements. They were supposed to move together. Infantry protecting tanks from close-range anti-tank weapons, tanks providing fire support for infantry. Instead, they moved independently. Webb identified the problem. An oberleutnant was supposed to coordinate tank-infantry cooperation. Webb could see him attempting to direct units from a covered position. But the tanks couldn't see his signals. The oberleutnant had to expose himself to signal the tank commanders. He stepped into the open, raised his arms, began signaling. Moment of exposure, 4 seconds, distance 600 down, 45 yards. Webb fired. 11th kill. The oberleutnant fell. Tank infantry coordination collapsed immediately. Tanks continued advancing alone. Infantry hesitated, losing the momentum they needed to keep pace. American anti-tank guns positioned along the ridge opened fire. 3 German tanks destroyed in 90 seconds. Without infantry support, the tanks were vulnerable. The assault lost momentum. At 0643 hours, a German battalion commander was forced forward. The attack was failing. It needed a senior officer to restore coordination, to push units forward, to salvage the assault before it collapsed completely. A major emerged from cover, moving toward the forward units, attempting to rally soldiers who were falling back. Distance, 760 yards. Extreme range. Smoke still obscuring parts of the battlefield. Webb watched through the scope, waiting. The major kept moving. The smoke shifted. Wind pushed it east. Brief window of clear visibility. 6 seconds, maybe 7. Webb adjusted for range, for wind, for the slight left tendency his rifle showed at 700 yards. He exhaled halfway, held, squeezed. 12th kill confirmed. The major fell. The German assault completely broke down. Units that had been advancing stopped. Some retreated to assembly areas. Others held position, leaderless, waiting for orders that wouldn't come. The attack that was supposed to break through American lines at 0600 hours had failed by 0700 hours. American casualties, 12 wounded, 0 killed. German casualties, estimated 180 killed or wounded, 3 tanks destroyed. Webb's 48 hours were complete. 12 officers, 12 kills. 1 failed German offensive. The mathematics were brutal and clear. 12 dead officers had rendered 3 German battalions combat ineffective. At 0730 hours, an American patrol reached Webb's position. Captain William Hart, a company commander from the 3rd Battalion, led the patrol. Hart stared at Webb and Price like they were ghosts. "Major Gaines wants you back at battalion headquarters. Now. He's been trying to reach you by radio for 3 hours." Webb and Price returned to American lines. First hot food in 2 days. First real rest. Other soldiers stared at them, whispering. Word had spread through the division faster than official reports. 1 sniper had killed 12 German officers, had stopped an entire division's offensive. Soldiers Webb didn't know approached him, asked questions, wanted to hear the story. At 1100 hours, Webb reported to Major Gaines at battalion headquarters. Gaines was standing behind a field desk covered in maps and intelligence reports. He looked at Webb for a long moment before speaking. "What you did was reckless, insubordinate, and brilliant. I should court-martial you for disobeying direct orders. Instead, I'm recommending you for the Bronze Star." Gaines showed Webb the intelligence. Reports. The German 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division had been withdrawn from the sector. The official German report, intercepted by Allied intelligence, cited unacceptable officer casualties and breakdown in command effectiveness. The division was redeployed to a rear area for reorganization. 3 battalions were listed as combat ineffective due to leadership losses. Gaines said, "One sniper did what an entire artillery battalion couldn't do. You broke them. Not just their attack, their entire division." But Gaines was also furious. "You disobeyed direct orders. I told you not to go forward. You went anyway. Took your spotter with you. Put both your lives at risk without authorization." Webb's response was simple. "Yes, sir. Would do it again, sir." Gaines considered court-martial. The regulations were clear. Disobeying orders in combat. Operating outside assigned sector without authorization. But the results spoke for themselves. 0 American casualties, 180 German casualties. An entire division withdrawn. Gaines decided against court-martial. Instead, Gaines did something unusual. He wrote a detailed report on Webb's tactics, submitted it to Division Intelligence with a recommendation for systematic officer targeting doctrine. The report included Webb's target identification methods, his range calculations, his tactical impact analysis. The conclusion was direct. Sniper employment against enemy command structure yields disproportionate tactical advantage compared to conventional sniper employment against individual soldiers. On October 5th, Webb's story reached other divisions. Snipers from the 90th Infantry Division requested briefings. The 4th Infantry Division sent 2 snipers to interview Webb. Even British forces in adjacent sectors heard about the American sniper who'd killed 12 German officers in 48 hours. Webb was reluctant. He wasn't comfortable with attention, didn't like being treated as special. But Major Gaines ordered him to teach. On October 8th, Webb conducted his first training session. 12 snipers from the 5th and 90th Infantry Division Sassens gathered in a tent at battalion headquarters. Webb stood in front of them, uncomfortable, not trained as an instructor. He explained his philosophy in simple terms. Don't shoot soldiers. Shoot the men telling soldiers what to do. A German private follows orders. Kill him and another private takes his place. A German officer gives orders. Kill him, and 30 privates don't know what to do. He demonstrated officer identification at range, showed the snipers how to read German rank insignia at 600 yards and beyond, explained the behavioral patterns. Battalion commanders positioned themselves where they could see multiple company areas. Company commanders stayed 30 to 50 yards behind the main line. Platoon leaders moved with assault units. Each rank had distinct positioning and movement patterns. Webb explained his targeting priority system. Battalion commanders first. They coordinated the largest number of units. Company commanders second. They controlled the immediate tactical fight. Platoon leaders third. They led from the front and were easiest to identify. Some snipers were skeptical. One sergeant from the 90th Division said, "Officers are harder targets, lower success rate. We're trained to maximize kill count. Targeting officers reduces our numbers." Webb's response was simple. 1 officer's worth 30 soldiers. Math works out. You can shoot 10 privates and the attack keeps coming. You shoot 1 hauptmann and the attack stops. By October 15th, 18 snipers were using Webb's methods across 2 divisions. Results were immediate. German counterattacks across the sector became disorganized. Officer casualty rates in the 5th Infantry Division sector increased 340% compared to September. German forces responded by ordering officers to stop wearing rank insignia in forward areas. But behavioral patterns remained visible. Officers still had to coordinate units, still had to position themselves where they could see and direct soldiers. Webb's methods continued working even after Germans attempted to adapt. The doctrine was spreading. One backwoods hunter from West Virginia had changed how American snipers fought, and German officers were dying because of it. On October 20th, 1944, the German army issued new protocols from Wehrmacht High Command. A directive went out to all units facing American forces in France. German officers were forbidden from exposing themselves in sectors where American sniper activity had been reported. They must direct operations from covered positions. They must use radio communication instead of visual signals. The directive specifically mentioned increased American sniper effectiveness against command personnel. German sniper units received specific orders to hunt American sniper teams. Webb became a priority target. German intelligence had identified him through intercepted radio communications and interrogation of captured American soldiers. Reports referred to Amerikanischer Scharfschütze in West Virginia, the American sniper from West Virginia. A bounty was placed, 500 Reichsmarks for Webb's death. That was 6 months' pay for a German private. On October 24th, a German sniper team attempted a counter-sniper operation. 2 German snipers positioned themselves in buildings overlooking areas where Webb was known to operate. They waited, watching, hoping to catch him in the open. Webb spotted them first. Distance, 680 yards. Both snipers were in covered positions, barely visible. Webb didn't take the shot. Instead, he reported their position to American artillery. 10 minutes later, artillery fire eliminated both German snipers. 8 shells bracketed the building where they'd been hiding. Webb's logic was simple. Don't need to. Shoot everyone myself. Just need them dead. But German adaptation continued. Officer casualties began dropping because Germans were changing tactics. By November, German officers were operating almost exclusively from rear positions. They coordinated through radio and runners. They avoided forward areas where American snipers could engage them. Webb's effectiveness declined, from 12 kills per week in October to 4 in early November, then 2 by mid-November. December 1944 brought Webb's biggest test, the Battle of the Bulge. German winter offensive through the Ardennes. Germans were employing their new doctrine systematically. Officers stayed in rear areas. They used extensive radio communication. They never exposed themselves to direct fire. Webb was reassigned to the Ardennes sector with the 5th Infantry Division. His first week produced 0 officer kills. Germans were too protected, too disciplined. The new doctrine was working. Webb adapted. He started targeting radio operators instead of officers. His logic was sound. No radio operator meant no communication from rear area officers. Without communication, officers might as well not exist. On December 22nd, Webb killed 8 radio operators in 3 days. German communications collapsed in his local sector. Radio networks went dark. Officers in rear areas couldn't coordinate their units. They were forced forward again to restore command, to give orders face to face, because radio was no longer reliable. Webb went back to targeting officers. 5 kills in 2 days. The principle held. Disrupt command structure. Method didn't matter. Kill officers directly or kill their ability to communicate. Either way, chaos resulted. Either way, German attacks failed. In January 1945, the U.S. Army finally made it official. Field Manual 23-11 received an amendment. Employment of snipers against enemy command personnel. Webb's methods were now doctrine. All sniper schools began teaching officer identification. The training curriculum included rank insignia recognition at extended range, command post identification through behavioral patterns, target priority systems, and tactical impact assessment. By February 1945, 214 American snipers were using systematic officer targeting across the European theater. Results were measurable. German counterattack effectiveness dropped 41% in sectors with active sniper operations. The British Army took notice. The Canadian Army requested Webb for a training mission. Higher commands were finally recognizing what Webb had proven in October. One sniper targeting officers was worth 10 snipers targeting soldiers. In March 1945, Webb trained British and Canadian snipers at a combined arms school in Belgium. He taught 47 Allied snipers over 2 weeks. The British adapted his methods for their own doctrine. Canadian snipers brought the techniques back to their units. The principles spread across Allied forces faster than any official directive could have spread them. April 1945 brought the end of the war in Europe. Webb's final tally was 63 confirmed kills. 58 were officers. 5 were critical radio operators. Estimated tactical impact, prevented or disrupted, 23 German counterattacks. Estimated American lives saved, 400 to 600 soldiers who would have died if those counterattacks had succeeded. But Webb never received major decoration. No Medal of Honor, no Distinguished Service Cross. He received a Bronze Star for meritorious service. The citation didn't mention officer targeting. The official reasoning was that the doctrine remained controversial. Some commanders thought targeting officers violated principles of honorable warfare. They considered it assassination rather than combat, an ungentlemanly way to fight. Webb didn't care about medals, he cared about numbers. Soldiers who came home because German attacks failed before they started. Germany surrendered in May 1945. Webb remained in Europe through June, helping train the final class of snipers who would never see combat. He returned to the United States in July 1945. Mustered out in September 1945. Returned to Mingo County, West Virginia, went back to his father's house, went back to hunting in familiar forests. He found civilian life difficult. Couldn't explain to neighbors what he'd done. Couldn't talk about officer targeting without sounding like a killer. People in Mingo County understood hunting. They understood shooting deer and turkey. They didn't understand shooting men who were coordinating other men. That required explanations Webb couldn't give. He went to work in the coal mines like his father. Dangerous work. Men died regularly in cave-ins and gas explosions. But it was simpler than war, more honest. You dug coal, you got paid. You went home. No moral complexity. In 1947, Webb married Mary Catherine Stone, a local girl he'd known before the war. They had 3 children over the next 6 years, 2 daughters and a son. Webb never talked about the war with his family, never discussed France, never mentioned the 12 officers in 48 hours. His daughter, Sarah Webb Collins, was interviewed in 2003 for a military history project. She said, "Dad was a quiet man. Didn't talk about France. Didn't talk about shooting. The only time I saw his rifle was when he went turkey hunting every spring. Same patience, same discipline. He'd sit in the woods for 6 hours waiting for the perfect shot." She continued, "I found out about his war record from a newspaper article when I was 16. Asked him about it. He said, did what needed doing, nothing special. That was all he'd say." In 1968, the U.S. Army Sniper School contacted Webb. The Vietnam War was creating enormous demand for trained snipers. The Army wanted Webb to teach. He was 56 years old. He declined. "I'm 56 years old. Taught enough killing." But he agreed to give one lecture at Fort Benning. In November 1968, Webb spoke to 80 sniper candidates. He stood in front of them, uncomfortable, 60 pounds heavier than his combat weight, hands scarred from 20 years of coal mining. He explained his philosophy in words these young men would remember for the rest of their lives. You're not hunting men. You're hunting the chaos. Officer dies, chaos happens. Chaos saves American lives. He explained patience. Rushed shot's a wasted shot. Wasted shot means someone else dies instead. Your buddy, your officer, some private who trusted you to do your job right. He explained discipline. Every bullet you fire better have purpose. Purpose isn't killing. Purpose is ending the fight before it starts. You shoot one officer, 30 soldiers don't attack. That's purpose. The lecture became legend. Bootleg recordings circulated through the sniper community for decades. Webb's principles were taught to Vietnam snipers, Desert Storm snipers, Iraq and Afghanistan snipers. Generations of American snipers learned from a 1-hour lecture given by a coal miner from West Virginia. Webb retired from coal mining in 1973. He was 61 years old. His lungs were damaged from 26 years underground, but not destroyed. He'd been luckier than his father, who died of black lung at 57. Webb lived quietly in Mingo County, hunted turkey every spring with the same patience he'd shown in France. According to neighbors, he never missed. Not once in 30 years of post-war hunting. In 1991, during the Persian Gulf War, U.S. Marine snipers employed systematic officer targeting against Iraqi forces. The Iraqi command structure collapsed in the first 72 hours of ground combat. Marine Corps after-action reports specifically credited Hickory Webb doctrine for the tactical success. Officers died before they could coordinate defenses. Iraqi units fought independently without coordination and were destroyed piecemeal. Webb learned about this from a newspaper article. A reporter tracked him down, asked for comment. Webb said, "Glad it still works. Hope nobody'd need it again." In 2001, Afghanistan, then Iraq. Modern American snipers were still using Webb's target priority system, adapted for insurgent warfare. Target cell leaders, target coordinators, target IED facilitators. Same principle. Disrupt command, create chaos, save friendly lives. The specific targets changed. The principle remained. In 2003, Military History magazine published a feature article on Webb. The Sniper Who Changed Doctrine: How One Appalachian Hunter Rewrote American Tactics. The article included interviews, declassified intelligence reports, tactical analysis from military historians. Webb read it. He told his daughter, "They make too much of it. Just shooting." On October 15, 2006, Samuel Hickory Webb died at age 84. Heart attack. Quick and painless. He was buried in Mingo County Cemetery with a military funeral and full honors. 23 active duty snipers attended, some traveling from as far as California. They stood at attention in dress uniform. None of them had known Webb personally. All of them had learned from doctrine he created. During the flag presentation to Webb's widow, Mary Webb told them, "Sam would have said you're making too much fuss." Then she added, "But he'd be proud you came." Today, U.S. Army Field Manual 3-22.10 Sniper Operations includes doctrine directly descended from Webb's methods. Chapter 4. Target Selection and Prioritization. Section 4-3. High-Value Target Engagement. Every American military sniper learns officer targeting. Every sniper school teaches patience, discipline, purpose. The National Infantry Museum at Fort Benning, Georgia, has a display case containing Webb's Springfield M1903A4. The placard reads, "Used by PFC Samuel Webb, October 1944. 12 confirmed kills in 48 hours. Changed sniper doctrine forever." The rifle still has Webb's modifications. Custom cheek rest carved from walnut. trigger adjusted to 3.2 pounds, tools of a turkey hunter adapted for war. Webb never wanted fame, never sought recognition. He just wanted German attacks to stop, wanted American soldiers to survive, wanted to go home to West Virginia. He accomplished all three. One backwoods hunter with patient discipline proved that chaos is a commander's worst enemy. And one shooter can create more chaos than an entire battalion. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Every like helps preserve these forgotten histories. Subscribe to see more stories about soldiers who changed warfare. Real men, real innovation, real impact. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if you served, if family served, if these stories matter to you. You're not just watching, you're keeping memory alive. These men deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching. Thank you for making sure Samuel Hickory Webb doesn't disappear into silence.